Now let me talk more about the life of Muhammad himself. So Muhammad was born in Mecca in the year 570 of the Christian era. He was born in Arabia. Now back then, as I said, Arabia was a tribal society. Semi-nomadic tribes that were engaged in caravan trading. That was the usual business of the day. Tribes that were at war with each other for business opportunities and for water. There were two main cultural centers in Arabia at that time, Mecca and Medina, two cities that would later become the most sacred cities for Muslims. So Muhammad was born in one of those cities, Mecca. Muhammad was born in Mecca, but he was raised as an orphan. His parents died. And he was raised by his uncle. Now let me first talk about religion. What religions did flourish in 6th century Arabia? First of all, it was polytheism. Ancient Arabian polytheism. Like any kind of polytheism, it was about the worship of various deities, and mostly deities that are associated with natural entities and natural events. The god of the sun, the god of the moon, the god of the lake, forest, stars, etc. So ancient Arabian polytheism was the most prevalent religion of the time in Arabia. But in addition to polytheism, there were some Christian communities. There was a Jewish community. We do not know much about that Jewish community. The Quran talks a lot about biblical characters, and it seems that Muhammad was well aware of at least some portions of the Bible. But strangely enough, the Quran does not talk at all about Hebrew prophets like Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah. So it seems that the Jewish community that was present in Arabia in the times of Muhammad may have had different kind of scriptures. Scriptures that did not include some portions of the Jewish scriptures that we have now. So in addition to Judaism and Christianity, there were some Zoroastrians. Zoroastrianism was a Persian religion started by the prophet Zarathustra around the 6th century before Christ. There were some followers of Abraham. The Quran calls them Hanifs. H-A-N-I-F. Hanif. A Hanif is a follower of the Abrahamic religion. According to the Quran, Abraham was not only one of the forefathers, not only the pioneer of monotheism, but also the founder of his own religion. And back then in 6th and 7th century Arabia, this religion was still flourishing, still in existence. So Muhammad was brought up as a pagan. He was raised as a pagan by his uncle. Muhammad was illiterate. He could not read. He could not write. In fact, Muslims consider it the miracle that this illiterate man was able to produce such a great book as the Quran. Now, the Quran became the classical book for the Arabic language and Arabic culture. The Quran for Arabic literature is like Shakespeare for the English literature. The Quran was written as a literary classic in addition to being a scriptural text. So Muslims consider it a miracle that an illiterate Muhammad could produce such a book. Now, when he grew up, Muhammad got engaged in caravan trading. As I said, that was the usual business of people who lived back then in Arabia. When Muhammad was 25 years old, he got married to a woman who was 15 years older than he was. She was 40, he was 25. I would say quite unusual. Nowadays, we would say that Muhammad married a cougar. Yes, being 40 years old back then meant being old, simply, because the average lifespan was not 70 or 80. Their marriage was very good and successful. They had 7 children together. However, unfortunately, most of them died in their infancy. One of their daughters that survived would later get married to the man who would become the 4th righteous caliph, Ali. We will be talking about this guy later on. So, when Muhammad was 40 years old, he experienced his first revelation, his first vision. As he describes this in the Quran, the angel Gabriel came to him in his vision and told him to recite. In the Bible, the angel Gabriel is the angel who is entrusted with delivering revelation. But Muhammad was illiterate and he got scared because he thought he is going crazy. He responded that he could not read and could not write and therefore cannot recite anything. Now, the person who supported Muhammad was his wife, Khadija. And eventually Muhammad accepted his prophetic mission and started his recitations. And as a result of these recitations, we have the Quran. The name Quran means literally recitation. So Muhammad would recite certain passages and they would be written down by his followers, and either before or after, right after his death, those passages were compiled into one book that we now know as the Quran. So Muhammad proclaimed his prophetic mission in Mecca. He was hoping that Jews and Christians will support him because they were, after all, brothers, monotheists. But they did not. In fact, in Mecca, Muhammad was not successful as a prophet. He was ridiculed, he was oppressed, and after his uncle died, and after his wife died, Muhammad and his followers, a handful of his followers, decided to migrate to Medina. Medina was the second major cultural center in Arabia at the time. And Muhammad was invited to Medina to settle the dispute between several clans. So they migrated to Medina in the year 622 of the Christian era. This year, 622, is the most important year in the religion of Islam, because Islam traces its beginnings not to the birth of Muhammad, not to the year of the first revelation of Muhammad, but to this year of migration of the community from Mecca to Medina. So the year 622 in the Christian calendar equals the year 0 in the Muslim calendar. So when Muhammad and his followers came to Medina, they were received as a clan or tribe of the immigrants. And Muhammad was the chief of this tribe. So in Medina, Muhammad held a public position. And his responsibility was to make peace in the city. So the first thing he did was to write down, well, he probably, since he was illiterate, he would only recite and someone else would write it down. But the first thing he did was to create a constitution of Medina. Some scholars argue that this is the first ever written constitution in the history of humanity. You can Google it, Constitution of Medina, and you can read it. It's a very short document, really a couple of pages, but it has two very important reforms that Muhammad was undertaking. The first reform was that he granted to all of the people who live in Medina freedom of religion and freedom of conscience. So if you are a Christian, you can still be a Christian. If you are a Jew, you can still be a Jew, even if you are a pagan. And Muhammad thought that his mission was to eradicate paganism. But in the constitution, he granted freedom of religion to everyone. So that was the first and very progressive measure that Muhammad did. This is a misunderstanding that Islam is a fundamentalist religion that wants to eradicate Jews and Christians and wants obedience from everyone. From the beginning, Islam was actually more progressive than Christianity at times. And the second major reform that was proposed by Muhammad was about the so-called blood money. It was customary then if some people from one tribe accidentally kill a person from another tribe, that this second tribe would make a revenge, would kill someone from the first tribe. And according to Muhammad's reform, instead of killing a person, the tribe that was guilty of this accidental killing should pay the so-called blood money to the first tribe. And that's how this matter should be settled. Muhammad lived in the city of Medina for 10 years, from 622 to 632. In these 10 years, he was able to become an effective ruler of a large part of Arabia. He succeeded in becoming such a ruler by means of war. According to the Muslim tradition, these were defensive wars, because people from other cities, other tribes, were trying to invade Medina, and Muhammad had to defend the city. He was a very gifted military commander. He achieved a lot of victories. And as a result of the victory, it was customary that in order to sign the peace treaty, in order to seal the deal, you have to take a wife from the tribe that was opposing you. So as a result, by the end of his life, Muhammad had 11 wives. And this is another controversy with Muhammad, who was polygamous. Let me make some comments about polygamy in Islam and monogamy in Christianity. Now, this is a purely cultural issue. The books like Da Vinci Code are successful only in the Christian cultural environment, because Jesus was never married. And to suppose that Jesus may have been married to Mary Magdalene and they may have had a child, that is very exciting and unusual to people who come from the Christian background. However, if the book such as this appears in the Muslim cultural environment, when Muhammad had 11 wives, it would not sell. So 11 wives, one more wife, one less wife, doesn't really matter. So for Christians, the issue of polygamy, the idea that Muhammad was polygamous, is awkward, because after all, he was a prophet. But for Muslims, the idea that Jesus was never married is equally awkward, because from the Muslim perspective, the prophet should get married, should have family, like everyone else. So did Moses, so did Muhammad, and the fact that Jesus never had a wife, never took a wife, never had children, is equally awkward for the Muslim community, because their train of thought is this: a Jewish boy, 29 years old, living with his parents, not good. So this is a cultural issue, and we leave it as it is. In the year 632, Muhammad dies, and according to most Muslims, Muhammad dies without appointing any successor.